What's up, everybody? I'm Jacob Soboroff. You're watching the West Coast edition of HuffPost Live. Joining us from Washington, D.C. for a check of today's top political stories is HuffPost politics reporter Arthur Delaney. Hey, man.
Hi, Jacob. How are you?
Good. Good to see you. I'm good. Arthur, let's get it kicked off. In a news conference today, President Obama addressed the political scandal that's brewing over at the IRS over officials reportedly targeting conservative groups with Tea Party or Patriot in their names.
Well, let me take the IRS situation first. I first learned about it from the same news reports that I think most people learned about this. I think it was on Friday. This is pretty straightforward. If, in fact, IRS personnel engaged in the kind of practices that have been reported on and were intentionally targeting conservative groups, then that's outrageous, and there's no place for it. They have to be held fully accountable because the IRS, as an independent agency, requires absolute integrity, and people have to have confidence that they're applying it in a nonpartisan way, applying the law in a nonpartisan way. You should feel that way regardless of party. I don't care whether you're a Democrat, Independent, or a Republican. At some point, there are going to be Republican administrations. At some point, there are going to be Democratic ones. Either way, you don't want the IRS ever being perceived to be biased and anything less than neutral in terms of how they operate. So this is something that I think people are properly concerned about. The IG is conducting its investigation, and I am not going to comment on their specific findings prematurely, but I can tell you that if you've got the IRS operating in anything less than a neutral and nonpartisan way, then that is outrageous. It is contrary to our traditions, and people have to be held accountable, and it's got to be fixed. So we'll wait and see what exactly all the details and the facts are. But I've got no patience with it. I will not tolerate it, and we will make sure that we find out exactly what happened on this.
Despite the president saying that he first heard about this all on Friday, reports today indicate this was public information last year. Our colleague Michael Calderon says that Colleen Owens, a stay-at-home mom with no professional journalism experience, wrote a blog called "Is the IRS Attempting to Intimidate Local Tea Parties?" after the Blaze posted a similar story, a similar question. Arthur, is this pretty bad for the IRS? Marco Rubio called for the chief's resignation. I even saw Democrat Joe Trippi agreeing with Bush Press Secretary Ari Fleischer, which never, ever happens on Twitter. This is a mess, Is this only going to add more fuel to the fire?
Oh, yeah, it's a total mess. And you say it was publicly known a year ago, but really it was reported only by conservative media and with headlines like the one you said with a question mark.
Right.
And so they weren't really asserting that this was definitely happening, but nobody believes those websites anyway. But for once, they were clearly right. This is actually what the IRS was doing. And I think Obama's comments show that he realizes this is a scandal that will probably dog him for the rest of his second term. It's a total disaster for him.
Boondoggle. Arthur, NBC News' Tom Brokaw weighed in on the brewing IRS scandal earlier today on Morning Joe when he suggested how the Obama administration should respond to reports of the IRS targeting conservative groups. Take a look.
There's only one spin for the president to make, which is to come out and say this is outrageous, it's unacceptable in my administration. I have asked the people who are responsible for this to be removed from their jobs, and we're going to have a complete investigation and a thorough house cleaning, if necessary, of the IRS. I'm offended by it. This is not a political issue or a conservative or a liberal issue. It really is about trusting your government, especially when it comes to one of the most sensitive parts.
And do you think this should have been done already?
No, I think, I'm sure that if they had to take the weekend at least to find out who was culpable here and what the details are. But the president should have had a statement already about, we know it's prima facie that there in fact was a targeting of conservative groups. That was admitted by the IRS. Once that came out, the president should have had a statement, it seems to me, right off the bat. But now it's time for action. Statement, then action. Let's get this cleaned up and move on. It's welcome to the second term, Mr. President.
So put your political strategist hat on, Arthur. Should President Obama take Brokaw's advice here?
He did take Brokaw's advice. He clearly watched Morning Joe this morning and listened to His Eminence Tom Brokaw and said almost exactly what Brokaw said he should say. This is an outrage, and we're going to get on top of it, and imply that there would be accountability, meaning people getting fired, heads rolling. Definitely following the Brokaw playbook there, which I think is probably a pretty obvious playbook in this situation, where there's no clear defense that you can make for what the IRS was doing. And the IRS came out bumbling so much with the press conference last week, where some official there was saying, "I'm not good at math," to the reporters. Is pretty appalling.
Yeah, not a good answer. Let's move on to the next one, Arthur. A new national poll finds, despite a consistent hammering from congressional Republicans, Hillary Clinton still more trusted than the GOP over the attack at the U.S. consulate in Benghazi that killed 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens. A public policy polling survey found that voters trust Hillary Clinton over congressional Republicans, 49 to 39%. A couple of other interesting stats. 41% of those polled think the aftermath of Benghazi is the worst political scandal in American history. But in typical Doe fashion, get this, 39% of those folks, they don't know where Benghazi is. 10% said Egypt, 9% said Iran, even 6% said Cuba. So in case anybody is still confused, here's Benghazi, and there's Libya, and this is planet Earth. Okay, so Arthur, it doesn't look like the Obama administration's handling of this, the nightmare in Benghazi is being held against the Secretary of State at this point. I mean, it is, but I can't imagine it's going to come up again. I can't imagine it's not going to come up again, as we get closer to 2014, 2016, even though the polling indicates, she's not the one that's losing here.
Well, to be fair to the poll respondents, 96% of them at least got the right general neighborhood of on planet Earth, right? Only
fair,
6%.
fair. That's fair enough.
It was in Cuba.
That's true.
Yeah, the story will go on and on. I think part of the reason it doesn't get more traction with the public, even though there's potentially so much outrage, is not clear which aspect of it is supposed to be the biggest scandal. Is it the cover-up? Or is it the alleged stand-down order that happened? It's kind of a confusing story, but it's especially going to get more traction right now when it's part of this, trifecta with the Obama administration stepping on a rake, slipping on a banana, butt fumbling, essentially with all these terrible things happening at the same time. So the Benghazi story will definitely stick around.
Another new poll I wanted to talk to you about, Arthur. Another new poll. Check this one out. A new poll has former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, who recently anointed White House Correspondents' Dinner attendees as ass clowns, with a tiny lead over her potential rivals in the 2014 Republican primary for U.S. Senate. Palin bests Alaska Lieutenant Governor Meade Treadwell and former Senate nominee Joe Miller 32 to 30 to 24%, respectively. But she's not even running, and the poll was paid for by the Tea Party Leadership Fund that evidently wants to see her in the race. So what do you make of this?
So some sort of wingnuts want her to run, but she's already shown she's not really interested in public office. She left her governorship. She wasn't a lame duck. She just kind of quit. I think the poll is helpful to her quest to just continue making money and being famous, but I don't think, since she's given no hint that she's going to run for office, that's what will ultimately happen. I think she'd rather remain a commentator and be thought of as a kingmaker. Yeah,
I agree with you. She just wants to rake in the dough. Yeah. But there's another guy who decided to go back to politics instead of trying to rake in the dough. Former South Carolina Congressman and Governor, and now Congressman-elect Mark Sanford. For him, mum's the word even when talking to friendly outlets like Fox News. He was asked by Chris Wallace about his mistress-turned-fiancé appearing at his election night party, and Sanford didn't have all that much to say.
Are now engaged to the woman with whom you had the affair, Maria Boulain-Shapour. She made a brief appearance, and we have a picture of it up on the screen, at your victory party, which raised some eyebrows. Question, what did your boys think of that, and your 4 boys, and have they accepted her?
I'm not going to go into inter-family conversations, but I would just say it is what it is. And I'm right now at a weekend with one of my boys who has a whole host of different college friends here scattered across this house that I'm sitting in right now.
Do you have a date for your wedding? And will your fiance, will she come to Washington to live with you? I feel like I'm the National Enquirer here.
Exactly what is this? Is Fox News or National Enquirer? So I'm not going to make news on that front tonight.
So, you know, Sanford went after Clinton during the Lewinsky scandal, but should he have to answer these questions at this point? You know, I'm a little worried that this whole "it is what it is" going to be the new stock answer for every politician, you know, that gets asked any question about anything.
You can always say that at the end of the day, it is what it is, whatever it is you're talking about. But you know what was weird about his response to Chris Wallace there? Our own John Ward, who you can see over my left shoulder, was on the trail ahead of that election, and he asked a similar personal question. Is what you're doing right now, by putting your family through all this weird publicity, essentially wrecking your family? And Mark Sanford didn't say something like, oh, I'm not going to talk about this personal stuff. He took out his cell phone, called his son, and put John Ward on the phone with his son, and just essentially outsourced this question about his family to another member of his family. So I guess, you know, on Sunday he didn't feel like doing something like that, but it's not his standard response to say.
No, but obviously John Ward knows how to ask the questions. Chris Wallace has no idea.
Oh, well, Chris Wallace is a fabulous interviewer. I don't agree with you. He's my favorite of the Sunday talk show hosts.
I'm just playing around. Tell John Ward and Zach Carter I say hello behind you. But I do want to move on to another very serious story that should be very troubling to just about anybody. The U.S. Department of Justice obtained 2 months' worth of phone records of journalists working for the Associated Press news organization as part of an investigation into how the AP was informed of an al-Qaeda plot in Yemen before it was released to the public. The DOJ notified the Associated Press in a letter Friday that they had collected phone records of specific journalists at home and at work from AP offices in New York and Washington and Connecticut, all over the place. And on Monday, the AP's top executive responded by calling the Justice Department's actions an unprecedented intrusion into news gathering. Why, Arthur, wouldn't the AP have been notified in advance of this investigation? It seems like just such an incredible amount of information to gather for such a very specific investigation.
Right. So, yeah, they're supposed to give news organizations a heads up when they do this kind of thing. Why they didn't in this case, we don't know. But that's part of the reason everyone there's people are just unanimous that this is outrageous. And there's been no explanation whatsoever. So when I said earlier that, you know, Benghazi is the rake, the IRS is the banana peel, and this is the butt fumble, completing the trifecta of terrible Obama administration news. We don't know why they were doing this. But it's just outrageous. There's no explanation for it.
We did get a response from the Department of Justice. Our colleague Ryan Riley posted it to his Twitter account. The DOJ says that it values freedom of the press. This has a lot of people snickering, and makes efforts to notify news organizations before it subpoenas phone records unless it, quote, threatens the integrity of the investigation. You know, again, I think a lot of people think this is just language to justify what essentially is spying on the press here.
It's just a ridiculous statement. They might as well have said, we value freedom of the press, but at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's just they're just appearing to respond to the story, but they really haven't said anything. We don't have any answers to this. But I'm sure we'll get some later on.
And I would assume that the HuffPost Live audience will start the Is What It Is meme generator, and they will send us in some of those images very soon. I got one more story for you, Arthur, before I let you go. Now, finally, we all know the answer that will stump former Speaker of the House and 2012 Republican presidential candidate Newt Gingrich in Final Jeopardy. What is a smartphone? Gingrich needs your help, everybody, or the brochure that comes with your cell phone or your time machine. Newt Gingrich posted a video to YouTube on Friday in which he didn't seem to know what to call a modern-day cell phone that could do all kinds of fancy things. Seriously. Take a look.
We're really puzzled. Here at Gingrich Productions, we've spent weeks trying to figure out, what do you call this? Now, I know you probably think it's a cell phone. And if I say to audiences, how many of you have a cell phone that takes a picture, 97% of the hands go up. But think about it. If it's taking pictures, it's not a cell phone. If it has a McDonald's app to tell you where McDonald's is based on your GPS location, that's not a cell phone. If you can get Wikipedia or go to Google, that's not a cell phone. If you can watch YouTube, that's not a cell phone. Or Netflix. Think about it. this device is something new and different. I've been calling it a handheld computer, but I decided that really was misleading because, while it has the computing power of a 2003 laptop, its real power is not internal computation. Its real power is networking.
It's a smartphone, Newt Gingrich.
And you want, Newt Gingrich, you want to be the leader of our first moon base.
Oh, man.
That's
Exactly.
so
Thank you. Well said. There are smartphones on the moon, and you have to figure that out first and foremost. It is what it is, I guess you could say.
It is what it is. Thanks, Newt. Great job.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, if anybody has any suggestions for Newt Gingrich, you can join us on HuffPost Live, submit them in the comment well, and we'll be sure to forward them on to Newt Gingrich. Arthur Delaney, thank you for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. It is what it is.
It is what it is indeed. Good to see you. All right, stick around, everybody. We got more top stories coming up right after this short break.